Map and reduce are functions that you often hear JavaScript programmers talking about. So let's master these two functions. So what does map do? Map creates an array by calling a specific function on each element present in the parent array. So we have a parent array, and by calling a specific function on each element in the parent array, we end up creating a new array. It is used to iterate over an array and calling function on every element of the array. And important to note, the original array is not modified. So my parent array or my original array is not modified and a new array is created. Let's say we have this array of numbers 2, 3, 4. So now I can say array dot map, and we can say function, and it will run for each element of it. So I can say function element. And what should we return here? Let's say we want to return element plus 1, and this will return an array. So let me say let const arr1 is equal to this, and let's just do a console.log arr1. Now if I run this code, you can see it has become 3, 4, 5. So 1 has been added to each element of it. So what did we do? Each element of this array, we ran this function and the output of it was put here. So if I do a console.log element is, and let's call it element, then what should we get here? So on each element we can see we are calling this function and we are returning this value which is going into the new array. Let's check if it is going into the new array. Let me print the parent or the original array also, and let's see what do we get. We get 2, 3, 4, so that remains the same, and we have now created a new array here. Suppose I wanted to double each number, I could have just said element into 2 return. So now you can see this array has been doubled. Instead of this being a function defined here, we could have also defined a function double number, and let's say it takes a num and returns 2 into num. Now instead of writing this code here, I could have just called double number with the parameter element, and I could have returned it. So this is another way we are doing the same thing, and if we run it, we get the same output. Suppose instead of doubling, we write say a function is even on the number, and we can return say num percentage 2 is equal to 0. Now instead of calling double number, if I wanted to create is even, now what should I get? So I get true, false, true. So this is now an array of booleans that we have created. So for 2 it gets true, for 3 it gets false, for 4 it gets true. Let's say we have an array of names. So what can we do with map here? So let's look at an example. So names dot map, and let's say we say function with the parameter element, and what do we say? We want an array of the length of each string. So we can say return element dot length, and this we map copy into a assign to a variable array. I can just do console.log arr, and now if I run it, what will I get? I get the length of each string. We could have say converted them into say uppercase. So I could have said to uppercase and they would have become a string having all uppercase. Let's look at a few exercises using map. Given an array of numbers, create an array with the squares of the numbers. So let's say we have this array of numbers num 2, 3, 4, 5. So we can say const arr is equal to nums dot map function element, and for each element what we can return is we need a square, so we can just say element into element. And now if I do a console.log arr, what do I get? I get 4, 9, 16, 25. If this was an empty array and we ran it on it, we would just get an empty output. Given an array of numbers, create an array with the absolute values of the numbers. Suppose we have this array numbers. So what do we want? An array with the absolute values. Absolute value. So what does absolute value means? So if the number is greater than equal to 0, so if n is greater than equal to 0, it is n. Otherwise it is minus 1 into n. So that negative number becomes positive. So absolute value of minus 5 is 5. So let's write this function. So let's say const nums1 is equal to numbers dot map function element. And what do we do here? We will say if element greater than equal to 0. So if it is greater than equal to 0, return element. We want the same value. Else, what should we return? Minus 1 into element. So we will return this value. And now if I do a console.log nums1, let's see what do we get. We get 3, 10, 5, 0, 22, 6. So minus 5 has become 5 in this new array and minus 22 is 22 here. So we have used map and this function ran on each element in the array and put it in the new array. So we have done it. We can test it for other values also. So let's just put say only negative values. It's working fine. And if I check it on an empty array, it's working fine. Given an array of strings, create an array where each string is enclosed between open close brackets p and slash p. Let's say we have the string array which has certain strings in it, and what is our objective? To enclose each string between p and slash p. So how should we do it? So let's say const arr1 is equal to strarray dot map function element. And what do we need to do? We need to enclose each string, each element between them. So we can just say return plus element plus slash p. So each string will get converted like this. And now if I do a console.log arr1, what do I get? I get it's enclosed between these values. That is exactly what we wanted. Given an array of strings and a number max length, create an array where each string has a maximum length of max length. So each string in the new array should have a maximum length of maxlen. If the length of any string is more than maxlen, then the first maxlen characters of that string are taken. So we'll take the first characters till maxlen and put it there. Suppose we have this string array and maxlen given to us. So we need to create that new array. So let's use map function element. Now for each element we will check the length. If the length is less than equal to 3, then that part, the whole string will go. Otherwise we will use substring. So I can say if element dot length is less than equal to 3. If this is the case, I can return element. Else what should I return? I should return element dot substring and the first 3 characters in it. Or so I shouldn't have said 3 here, I should have used maxlen and 0 to maxlen. So this would return it, and now I need to assign it to this array to a variable. So const arr is equal to, and let me just do a console.log arr. Now if I run it, what do I get? Hi, hello has become HEL, the first 3 characters, by GOO and A. Suppose I make the maxlen 10. So all the strings are coming in as it is. Suppose I make maxlen as 1. Then we get the first characters of each string. Let's look at the next exercise. Given an array of JSON where each JSON is the sales data with the fields name, quantity and price. Create an array of JSON where each JSON has the fields product and value. So the new array has a JSON where each JSON has these 2 fields, product and value. And what is value? Value is quantity into price. Sort the array in descending order based on value. So once we have created this array, we need to sort it in descending order based on value. Suppose we have this array prods which has these JSON, and each JSON has name, quantity and price. So we need to create a new array, and that array the JSON should have the fields name and value. So let's say we do prods.map function element. Now the element is a JSON. So what do we need to do? We need to create a new JSON. So we can create a new JSON. Let JSON1 is equal to, we can say name is element.name, and what we can say value is, we can calculate the value. So let me just calculate the value. Let value or v1 is equal to element dot quantity into element dot price, and so I can say value is v1. So now that we have formed our JSON, I can just return JSON1. We have returned it. So let me just const array is equal to this, and let me just do a console.log arr. So we have gotten the name and the value, and let's check the value. 20 into 15, 300, 15 into 10, 100. They all seem to be fine. Now what's the second step? We need to sort it. So I need to do array.sort compare ascending value. So let's define this function. So I can say function compare ascending by value, and we need to map product 1 and product 2. So we can say if p1 dot value. So this array has this field value is greater than p2 dot value. So what order are we sorting in? In descending. So if the value is greater, we want it earlier, so I should return -1. Else if p1 dot value is less than p2 dot value, we would want it later now, so I would say return 1, else return 0. Let me just put the print after the sort. So now that we have sorted it, let me just run it. So we get it sorted by value. So Colgate 360 is highest, then Pepsi, then 150, then 120 and 100. So what did we do? We used map to create the new JSON, and once we created the new JSON, we sorted it using array.sort. Given an array of strings where each string is the name of the person, create an array of JSON where each JSON has the fields first name and last name. So from the name, we need to figure out the first name and last name and make a JSON. Note, the names given in the strings are of the type Jack, so it's either a single name, or Bob Smith, which means a first name last name separated by a space. Let's say we have such an array of names. So what do we need to create? We need to create a JSON with first name and last name for each such string. So let's say we say names.map function element, and for each element let's call a function return make name JSON with the parameter element. So let's call this function. So let's now define this function. So function make name JSON, what does it do? It takes a name as parameter and it will now find out the space. So how can I find out the space? I can say let index is equal to name dot index of space. So let's check if there is a space in it. If there is no space in it, it means it's a single name. And if there is a space in it, I can break that into two using the space. So if index is less than 0, then what should I do? I should just create a JSON. So let me just let JSON is an empty JSON. So I can say JSON dot first name is equal to name. So my JSON dot first name is this, and my JSON dot last name is an empty string. So this is what we can do. And if index is not less than 0, which means we found a space, so I will need to use substring. So I can say JSON dot first name in this case is equal to name dot substring 0 comma index. So from 0 to index, if I do the substring, I'll find the first name. So Bob Smith, this is where I would have found the space, so I'll get Bob. And I can say JSON dot last name is equal to name dot substring, and when I say name dot substring, I will say index plus 1. So now I get that JSON. Here let's map it to an array. Const arr is equal to this, and let's just print this array. Console.log arr. We have gotten undefined everywhere. Why did we get undefined? Because we forgot a return JSON. So now when we look at it, we have gotten these 4 values: Jack first name, empty last name, Bob Smith, Anna Cook, and Tim, and last name as an empty. So this is what we were looking for. Now let's look at reduce. Reduce is used to reduce the array to a single value. So if we want to reduce the whole array to a single value, like for example, we want the largest number, the sum, the product, in which we are reducing the array to a single value, we will use reduce. And how do we do it? By executing a provided function for each value of the array and storing the return value of the function in an accumulator. So this will make more sense as we look at a few examples. Suppose we have this array nums and we want to find the sum of the elements in this array. So we can say nums dot reduce and we will define a function. Now this function, typically we will take two parameters. The first parameter is ACC, which is the accumulated value, and the second parameter here is the current value. So this is our accumulated value and this is our current value. So let's see how do we use it. So now I want to find the sum. So each element I will continue to add to my accumulated value. So I can say return ACC plus current, or let me say current plus ACC. So to my accumulated value, if I add my current, then I am continuously adding these numbers. And when I call it the first time, what should I initialize my accumulated value with? I will give 0. So once I have done it, let me now say let sum is equal to this, or let's say instead of sum, let's call it val, and I can say console.log val. Let me run this. So I get 9, which is 2 plus 3 plus 4. Let me put a console.log here to just visualize what is happening. So console.log accumulated, comma, current. If I run it, so the first time accumulated had the value 0 because we initialized it with 0, and it got the value 2. Current value was 2. So we returned current plus accumulated, which is now become the accumulated, as we can see. So the next time it is 2, 3. Now 2 plus 3 is 5. So next time it's 5 plus 4, and it returns the accumulated value 9. So the accumulated value works in this fashion. Suppose instead of the sum, we wanted to find the product. So let's say if I just make it current into accumulated, will it work? So here this doesn't seem to work. So what's the problem here? So the problem is that my initial value in the accumulated is 0. So now if I multiply anything with 0, it will remain 0. So what should be my accumulated if I want product? It should be 1. So unlike sum wherein we would do 0, if I make it 1, then I get the correct accumulated value. Suppose we have an array of strings and we want to use reduce to concatenate all the strings into a single string from this array. So we can say names dot reduce, and let's say function accumulated, comma, current. So one of the techniques we typically use, or at least I would prefer to use, is always call it accumulated and current in my function here, so that it is clear in my mind what am I doing. So now what do we need to do? We need to append it. So I just need to return cur plus accumulated. So I have appended those strings. What should be my initial value in this case be? So now if I give a 0, that would be wrong. I need an empty string because I'm accumulating them, appending them strings. And let's say let val is equal to this. And I can just do a console.log val. If I run it, what do I get? I get this string Julia, Bob, Anna, Tom, Jack. Suppose I wanted that after each string I want a colon. So what could I have done here? I say plus, say colon. Let's run it now. What do I get? I am getting it in this fashion. So why? Because I am doing current plus accumulated. So if I had, let's just do a console.log accumulated comma current to understand it. So the first time the accumulated is an empty string and I get jack. So what am I getting as an output? Current plus accumulated plus colon. So I get jack colon as my output, which is becoming my next input, and that is Tom. So then what am I saying? I'm saying Tom plus accumulated. So it should become Tom jack colon and then a colon. So this is not what we wanted. We wanted the strings in between. So what should I say? I should say actually accumulated plus current plus colon. If I run that, what do I get? I get what I was looking for. So the output is also correct. They are in the right order. Jack, Tom, Anna, Bob, Julia, which is what we are getting. And the colons are also coming correct. So these are some things we should keep in mind while we are doing it. Suppose I just wanted to append them and only their first character. So I could have just said current 0, which would mean the first character. Now if I run it, what would I get? I get J, T, A, B, J. Let's say we wanted to get the total length of all the strings in the array. So if you just wanted to do it, I could have said, instead of this, accumulated. What should we accumulate here? Current dot length. So we want to just add the lengths. If I do that, why have I gotten it like this? Because my accumulated was a string to start with. So it has done string concatenation, but I wanted addition here. So this should be 0. Now when I run it, I get 18, which is 4 plus 3, 7, 10, 18, perfectly fine. So it's also very important that you ensure and think through what is your initial value for the accumulated. This is extremely important. Let's look at some problems using reduce. Given an array of numbers, calculate the sum of their cubes. So we have been given an array of numbers, and what do we want to do? Sum of their cubes. So I can say nums dot reduce function accumulated comma current. So what do I want to accumulate? I want to accumulate the cubes. So I should say let cube is equal to current into current into current. So I've gotten the cube and I can return accumulated plus cube. So I'm accumulating the cubes, and what should be my initial value be? Because I'm doing a sum, it is 0. Let me put it in let sum is equal to this, and I can just do a console.log sum. Let's run it. I get 224, which is 8 plus 27, 35 plus 125 and 64, 224. Suppose it was only 2. Let's run it for that. What do I get? I get 8, which is perfectly fine. Given an array of numbers, find the largest number in the array. Let's say we have this array of numbers and we want to find the maximum value. And let's make an assumption that all the numbers are greater than or equal to 0. So let's say nums dot reduce function accumulated comma current. And what should we do in it? Now accumulated should be my current maximum value. So if my current number is greater than accumulated, I should return current because I found a larger number, else return accumulated. Now what should be my initial value? My initial value, because we have assumed all the numbers are greater than equal to 0, can be 0. So I can run it and let me say let max equal to this value. So let me do a console.log max. and what do we get? We get 10, which is the maximum value. Let me make this a 33. So we get the maximum value as 33. If we get it an empty array, what should we get? We should get 0, which was the initialized value we gave here. Given an array of strings, find the smallest string in the array. So smallest by length. So we have been given this array of strings and we want to find the smallest string by length. So how should we do it? We can say names dot reduce function accumulated comma current. And what should we do in this function? If current dot length is less than accumulated dot length. So in the accumulated we need strings because we want the smallest string by length. Then we should return current. Else what should we do? We should return accumulated. And what should we initialize it? So if I initialize it with an empty string and let me say let small str is equal to this, and let me print it console.log small str. Now what do I get? It's printing an empty string. So why is it printing an empty string? Because there won't be any string smaller than this. So I have a problem in my initialization. So there are two ways to solve it. So the first way is that we initialize it with one of the values in the array. So I can say let val1 is equal to an empty string, or let's say it is names 0, and I initialize it with val1. So now what will be the initial value? The initial value will be Steve, so we don't have an empty string, and now I get Ed. So this is working fine. But there would be a problem here. Suppose this array was an empty array. So if this array was an empty array, I would get an undefined here because names 0 is undefined. So in that case, what would I need to do? I would need that val0 is now not names 0, but it is an empty string. So we could have said val0 is equal to empty string if names dot length is greater than 0, then val1 is equal to names 0. Now if I run it, I get an empty string. So this is working fine for here. And if I put the values back and I run for it, I get Ed back. So that's one way to run it. The other is that I do not provide an initialization value. So if I do not provide an initialization value, if the array is non-empty, it will automatically use the first value to initialize. So it will automatically use it. So if I just run it like this, it will give me Ed. So typically when we are solving the min or the max, we can use this approach. So what have we done here? Not initialized the accumulated. And what does this means? That accumulated is initialized to the first value in the array. So the initialized to the first value in this array. So typically for min and max, this is the way we can solve this problem. So even in the max one, instead of initializing it and making this assumption, if we just did this, it would have worked perfectly fine. So you should go ahead and try that. Given an array of JSON where each JSON is the sales data with the fields name, quantity and price. So we need to calculate the total sales value. So we have been given this array of products with each JSON having the fields name, quantity and price. And what do we want to find? The total sales value. So we can say prods dot reduce function accumulated comma current. And what are we accumulating? The total sales value. So we can say let value 1, in this case for this one will be current dot quantity. So current is this JSON into current dot price. So that's my value for this product, and now I can say return V1 plus accumulated. So we can accumulate it in the V1, and what should we initialize it? We should initialize it with 0. So because initially it's a sum, so it should get initialized. So total sales is equal to this, and now if I can just go ahead and do console.log total sales, and if I run it, I get some 1030. So we can go ahead and check it. Let me make all of them say price 1, and now if I run it, I get 71, which is 35, and this, and I can again change these values and check it. So you should do that, check it for all the possible values and also calculate it and see that this is coming fine. Given an array of JSON where each JSON is the sales data with the fields name, quantity and price, find the product whose sales value is the maximum. So we need to find the product whose sales value is maximum. So we have this JSON products, and what do we need to find? Find product whose sales value is maximum. Let's say we say prods dot reduce function accumulated comma current, and let's say in the accumulated we hold the, what should we hold in the accumulated? Let's hold the JSON. So let's say accumulated has the JSON for the product with max sales. So then what do we need to do? If let's calculate the value for this product, so which is current dot quantity into current dot price. Let's do it for the accumulated. So let's say let accumulated value 1 or value is equal to accumulated dot quantity into accumulated dot price. Now if V1 is greater than accumulated value, so we need to return what? Current, else return accumulated, because that had a higher sales value. And what should we initialize it? So we need the accumulated to be a JSON. So either we can create a, in this case again we can, because we know the values are 0, so the sales cannot be less than 0, we could have created an empty JSON with 0 0 and initialized it. Or better still, in this case, if we do not initialize it, it should get initialized with the first JSON. Let's see if that works. So let me say let max prod is equal to this value, and let's do console.log max prod. Let's run it. I get the value Colgate. So it's working fine. And if I just wanted the name of the product, if the objective was just to get the name of the product, then I could have just said maxprod.name. So again here we have made use of the fact that the first, if the accumulated is not specified, it is the first value being used. And we can also test it. I could do a console.log accumulated. So it is starting with Pepsi, which is this, and then it changes. So instead of an empty, it is starting with Pepsi.